On today's show, the biggest difference between the undefeated Cleveland Cavaliers and last year's team, well, that might just be the play of Darius Garland as he's returned to all-star form. I talk about that, plus Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Kenny Atkinson, and the Cavs a championship contender with Katie Heindl of Basketball Feelings and the Locked On Daily newsletter. That's all straight ahead on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my new Substack, The Inside Shot, 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed. Also, show is available on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, of course, is sponsored by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, and new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Katie Heindl joins me on today's show as we talk about Darius Garland, how good he's been this year compared to last year, some big differences we see in his game year over year. The play of Donovan Mitchell. We talk about how Kenny Atkinson has changed this team. Also, I asked Katie at the end of the show, is this a Cavs team that is capable of winning the championship? So we talk about this team's ceiling and why we believe they can get to where we think they can get to. So like I said earlier, give us a 5-star rating. Hit that like button if you're watching the show on YouTube right now. And without anything more, here is my conversation with Katie Heindl. And joined now by Katie Heindl, who of course covers the NBA at large at her Substack, Basketball Feelings. She also handles the Locked On Daily newsletter that you should be getting in your inbox each and every day. Her writing can be found in the Cavs version. So just go subscribe to that at lockedondaily.com. You can check out what Katie writes for us at Locked On every single day. It's phenomenal content. You're really missing out if you're not subscribed both there and at Basketball Feelings. Katie, I want to start by talking about Darius Garland because he's been somebody that has been such a bright spot for the Cavs so far this year. He was named Eastern Conference Player of the Week on Monday of this week. He's had such a great start to the season. One of the things that I've really noticed about him that I think a lot of people that really has stuck out to them is how good he's been in the clutch so far this season. I think that's why he was Conference Player of the Week for his performance in the clutch, particularly, we saw it on Monday night. We saw it Saturday. We saw it against Milwaukee. We've seen a lot of really good play from Garland. What have you seen so far from him as sort of his return to all-star form start to the season?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. For me, it's a lot of the savviness that he's playing with. One of the criticisms that this Cavs team has gotten so often, especially with, maybe going out of the playoffs earlier than they would have wanted, is they're not necessarily mature enough or they're not ready enough, et cetera. But with everything that Garland went through last season, personal injury, personal loss, being away from the team, maybe going into the summer a little bit undecided on how the team stood and what things were going to be like, especially, and then getting a new coach in Kenny Atkinson. I feel like there was so much ample opportunity for him to take a step back. And not that that's what we would have wanted to see, but if it did happen, you wouldn't have been surprised by it. Like it might have just taken him a little bit longer to acclimatize and get up to speed, but we're actually seeing the complete opposite of it. It seems like he hasn't even missed a stride. He's so his maturation, I think, as a player, but also as a leader on the team is something that's really stood out to me. You talked about these kinds of him being sort of this clutch difference maker. And I think, again, that's a knock that a lot of younger teams or teams kind of vying for a title for the first time. By that, I mean the first iteration of this Cavs team get slighted is they can't hold it together in really tough spots or, kind of when the game basically comes down to the wire. And now there's all this added pressure because the Cavs are undefeated, like they just keep winning, and he's able to hold it together completely. Like he kind of can go stride for stride with somebody like Donovan Mitchell, which is very impressive to me too. It's just like they sort of have stepped into this dual leadership role of the team, which again, I think is really impressive. There's really not much that I'm not impressed by, I guess you could say, of Garland.
Right. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. And I was somebody who I spent the summer trying to buy up land on Darius Garland Island just because I thought he was going to have such a bounce back season after, as I have referred to last year for him, just a nightmare of a season. But this has been even better than I expected it to be. And one of the things, and I have been a believer, and I don't know where you stand on this, but I've been a believer that he and Donovan Mitchell can work together in the backcourt. I thought we saw good things from them the first year Donovan was in Cleveland. I do think at times it got to be a little bit too much your turn, my turn. But under Atkinson so far, I think that pairing has worked so well because that your turn, my turn feeling that I think we kind of all got watching them offensively has maybe not entirely disappeared, but it's gone significantly down. It feels like everything that's working for that grouping comes within the flow of Kenny Atkinson's offense.
No, I think you're spot on. And I think a lot of that comes from there's this willingness to tinker, right? And to adjust. And that is also for a team that's at this stage and has had like a superstar like Donovan Mitchell for one season or two. Like NBA time doesn't mean anything.
His third season.
This will be
time
his third.
Is a flat circle.
That's crazy. Yes. Yeah, it was like it's been one. No, apparently it's been two. So, yeah. So even more to my point, like when a star like that is established, they're usually quite reticent to adjust or take a different role. It's like, no, this is how I fit on this team. This is why you recruited me. This is why you wanted me here. So for somebody like Atkinson to come in and be able to tinker and adjust and make small that makes more sense to me for the Garlands and the, Jared Allens and the Mobleys of the team, especially because some of them are used to playing under Kenny Atkinson. But for Mitchell to be willing to do that, I think that takes a little bit more fortitude. And that wasn't something that he was always necessarily great at doing, when he was on the Jazz. So I really like the fluidity. And I think that's to go back to your point of this kind of like now me, now you. I think that's why it started to look a lot more seamless. And I do think it just speaks to the general IQ of somebody like Garland and how much we've seen that peak as well.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up the Mitchell aspect of this, because for somebody of his stature, who is an all-NBA player, first year in Cleveland, he finished 6th in MVP voting. He's a superstar. Like there's no better way to describe him than just a superstar player. But it can be difficult for that type of player to be willing to take a step back, not just throughout games, but specifically at the end of games. And we've seen that now. We've seen Donovan, of course, have big moments in the fourth quarter early on this season. Like I thought that the game on Monday night against the Bulls, he was really good in the fourth quarter, but Darius Garland also made plays down the stretch. Donovan obviously has the game-winning shot with under a second left against the Milwaukee Bucks a couple weeks ago. So it's not as if he hasn't stepped up in the clutch too, but being willing to share the load with another guy, not just another guy in the team, but another guy that plays a similar position to you, is what Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland have both done. And I think that speaks not only to Kenny Atkinson, I think it speaks to what this locker room has been like, and these guys genuinely do get along, but it also speaks, I think, to a lot of growth and a lot of maturation inside the locker room between the players that needed to step up.
No, I mean, like, I totally agree with you. I think that's been, and I think we're going to get to this, but I also think that's one of the reasons why the Cavs have been playing so cohesively, is just like there's this understated communication going on between them. And a lot of that is from going through the gauntlet together. Like, you forget, like Jared Allen's been there for a long time now. So is Mobley, right? And Garland too. And there's like a real intuitive understanding of how they each play basketball, but also how they look for each other on the floor and where they can challenge and push each other. And also where they're willing to just like step in and do, and kind of like, if somebody, fill the gaps, basically, like do these sort of intangible things. And I think we like to refer to that as selfless basketball, but it just like, I like to outline it because it encompasses so much more. And And I mean, the bonus part is this also seems oversimplified, but they seem like they're having the best time playing together.
Right. Yeah.
Like which, not to say there's no pressure, but it really just seems like they're very confident in who they are. They know what they can do. They know what the team can do together. So it does take quite a lot of the pressure off the team.
Right. It looks like they're having a good time. The vibes in Cleveland are immaculate. Now, I don't think anyone would push back on that. Like it's incredible to see the joy. And I think I think Darius Garland really is the barometer for this. When things are going really well, you can see how happy Darius Garland is playing basketball. And he has talked in interviews. I know he spoke with Cleveland.com about this specifically, but the joy in his game is back. And that is something that whether you're in person, watching on TV, like I think that is a very palpable thing. It's very clear to see. And I think that's a big reason why the Cavs are having the success they're having.
I think so. And I mean, someone like Garland, I remember when I was at Dime, it was either in his first or second season, we did a cover story, on him, and he talked how much it meant for him to be able to play for that team. And, just like the roots really that he has. And just what struck me about that is, to your point about joy, he is somebody who just like always has this kind of beaming smile on his face. He does carry a lot of the energy of the team. But a downside of that is you can be relied upon almost too heavily for it, like for not just for your, physical motor, but the emotional motor that you bring to the team as well. And, to go back to my earlier point, that was something I did have concerns about last season, because it was some of the first real public, at least, knocks that we've seen him take, not to mention a real debilitating injury in the sense that he was like getting all his nutrients through a straw for the longest time, which for a professional athlete, like that's such a wild shift, right? To the way that you're training and living and everything. So how he's kind of now bounced back, and we haven't really seen him miss a stride. I just think if people weren't giving him credit before for his capabilities as an athlete and his kind of maturation as a player and as a person, I think they should definitely be doing that this season.
Well, I think that Player of the Week award is certainly a step in the right direction as far as credit goes. I think Evan Mobley deserves credit. I think Donovan Mitchell deserves credit. And we're going to talk about those guys, plus how quickly all of this has come together under Kenny Atkinson next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. I've been telling you a lot about FanDuel Sportsbook because it is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets back if you win. That sounds like a pretty good deal. That is a reason why, just one of many reasons why, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. They've got a lot going on right now. They still have win totals for the NBA up. And I talked before the season about how I loved the Cavs to go over their win total at FanDuel of 48.5. Well, that number keeps climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. It's up to 55.5 on FanDuel right now. That's how confident they've become in your Cleveland Cavaliers. Maybe you think they're going to win 56 or more games. Well, you might want to toss a little bit of money on that over. Maybe you think 54 might be the number. Then the under could be something that hits. But the Cavs have been awesome. FanDuel Sportsbook is awesome. And right now, if you place a $5 bet, if you're a new customer, place a $5 bet. If that bet wins, you get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Maybe you think the Cavs are going to beat the Philadelphia 76ers tonight. I don't know what you think is going to happen, but maybe you think that's going to happen. You put $5 on it if you're new at FanDuel, $150 back in bonus bets if the Cavs move to 13-0 on the season. So when you get a hunch in the middle of game 2, and this is real important here, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. That page right on FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. To do that, just head on over to FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show, as I said, anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Also available on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. We spent a good chunk of time talking about Darius Garland, but now I do want to shift the conversation over to Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell, because Donovan Mitchell, I think, came into the season as a known commodity, Katie, and he's been a superstar player in this league, I think, for several years now. But watching him take a step back, I think, has been a really big deal for the Cavs, not because he's not capable of going out and being that superstar player. We saw that on Monday night against Chicago. That's still there. The Cavs are going to need him to be that guy at several points throughout this year. They just haven't needed it quite yet. And one of the reasons I think he's been okay being able to take a bit of that step back is how well Evan Mobley has developed offensively and the differences we've seen in his game so far this year. What has most impressed you about him?
I think you alluded to it, and it's just this ability to take a step back and to understand the ecosystem that you're in, which again is something that like a lot of superstars at that level, not just of that caliber of player, but also at this point in their career wouldn't necessarily be interested in. But I think what Mitchell understands is this Cavs team is so close, and has been kind of building towards what they have now for such a long time. It's an established, what was the word you used? I liked that. It's like an established property, but no.
Known commodity.
It's a known commodity. It's like an established resource, right?
Right.
And this was where I was a little bit dubious coming into the season because, you got to take every trade rumor with a grain of salt, certainly. But it really did seem like there was some, maybe it was just JP Bickerstaff, but like there was some unhappiness between Mitchell and potentially the franchise that looked like it was like, maybe this guy's not going to stick around. Maybe he wants to go elsewhere. And I think we see that so often from stars now of like giving it maybe 2 seasons and then saying like, peace, I'm going to go somewhere else, that you also start to get used to that rhythm, which is unfortunate. But he came in, like we had a coaching change, he came in and it just seemed like he took a look at the landscape and took a look at where all his teammates were at, where they had improved, what the team basically needed as a cohesive whole, and was like, okay, I'm willing to do that. And then on these nights where we do need a veritable superstar to come in and close out games, or to step in if somebody's having like an off shooting night or has just gotten cold or something like that, I can do that too, because that is also something we understand of Donovan Mitchell, his ability to prolifically shoot the lights out.
Yeah, he hit 7 threes on Monday night against Chicago. He's going to have plenty more games like that. I will say, I think that the unhappiness was a little bit overblown in terms of like maybe Mitchell wanting out. I think that this organization was fairly confident they were going to be able to get him to re-sign much earlier than I think a lot of people outside of Cleveland caught on to. And Donovan has, for the most part, been very happy throughout his time in Cleveland as someone who's gotten to know him a little bit. But it is refreshing to see that superstar want to stick around, especially in a smaller market like Cleveland, where we right? Like, what was the first thing we heard when Donovan Mitchell got traded to Cleveland? Oh, he's going to end up in New York eventually. And maybe one day he will, but that day's not going to be for a long time. And it is cool to see him be so happy with this organization in this city, in a place that I do think he believes he can win at the highest level. And I think all of the Donovan Mitchell conversation that we've had so far today gets back to one thing. And I think that it has shown his biggest priority is winning at this point in his career.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think, that has to do with where he is at in his career and his, his age, which unfortunately, as much as I love to harp on the fact that just because you're plus 28 in the NBA, it doesn't mean you're ancient. Got many great years ahead of you. But yeah, I think for him, it's again, like what I said before of understanding the ecosystem and where it's at this point in time serves that really well. It's interesting to me that you would say, because it's not like I thought of like Utah as a particularly large market. It's just interesting when people treat Cleveland, to me as someone who writes about the league at large, not necessarily Cleveland all the time, but when people treat Cleveland as this like stopover, like I think about the 3-way trade, like way back that sent, that sent Jared, like to me, I thought that was the heist of the season. Like it sent Jared Allen to Cleveland, right? Like everyone was focused on the Harden piece. And I was like, no, this is amazing. Like Cleveland got everything they wanted for the future of the team they're trying to establish. And that's exactly what happened. And same with Mitchell. I think when an athlete makes the choice to go to a quote smaller market, like a Cleveland, there's something about that speaks more to their, I think, resilience, but also the staying power. Like it's an intentional decision. It's not like when, I am in Toronto, so I feel like I can say this. It's not like when Kawhi wound up with the Raptors for one season. I would say that was a mixture of choice, but also just like, this is how the cards are kind of going to be dealt to this guy. But Mitchell made the choice. So again, I think you're right to say, I wasn't trying to imply before that he was leaving, and I think you're right.
No, I know.
That, yeah. But that, which is why I would have been surprised if he did leave, because to me it always seemed like he had a lot of teams clamoring for him at that time, and the Cavs were who he picked. So again, I think to see him resign and to see the team where they are now, it just feels like it's all sort of fitting into a larger vision that has frustratingly had some setbacks, mostly because of injuries, right? But is on track.
So I do want to shift now to Kenny Atkinson, because he is the only thing that changed between last year's team and this year's team. They returned just about every core member. I know they lost Marcus Morris Sr. I don't consider him a core member, even though he was seeing significant minutes in the postseason last year for the Cavs due to several injuries that set them back. But Atkinson is the biggest difference organizationally from last year to this year. And there are, I think, several differences between how the team played under JB Bickerstaff and how they play under Kenny Atkinson. I also think it's very interesting to see just how quickly this has all come together, because I thought they'd be much better offensively. I didn't think they would be historically good offensively at any point this season, and much less historically good through 12 games of the year. What have you seen that's so different about the way they play under Atkinson than previous iterations of this team?
Well, it's kind of a two-parter, because to me, like the Atkinson reunion with like a Jared Allen and a Karis LeVert, I can't help but think of a Nets team that I became obsessed with, when they were there, because I like remember that team, like people were like, and Jared Allen has spoke about this too, like himself, of just like there were no expectations. It wasn't like anyone thought they were going to make it to the playoffs, like very deep into the playoffs. But because of that, they got to have a lot of fun, and they created something. They basically created a culture from scratch, like it was real dire straits in Brooklyn. And I would argue it has been since then, since they decided to blow up that great team and ship everybody out. But to me, Allen being reunited with a coach at this point in his career feels very good. Like the timing feels perfect. And Karis LeVert too. And to what I was talking about earlier, just this tinkering, like he, as a coach, and this took me a little while to warm up to, honestly, with Atkinson, but like as a coach, he does like to get in and make very small adjustments. Louisa Thomas of the New Yorker just wrote a really great piece about the Cavs team. And she kind of, paralleled it with Jared Allen's love of building computers and like taking things apart and putting them back together again. And Atkinson has this, he can get very micro to macro in a very short period of time. And I think that's where, you talked about this a little bit earlier, where some of these adjustments have come from, like they might just be, I don't know, like very slight rotational tweaks or coverage kind of schemes, but it's like, you're not overhauling anything. You're just looking at like, who's playing better tonight in certain positions, and like, how can we play to their strengths, which sounds so easy on the surface. But again, you need complete buy-in of the team to be able to do that. And also the complete fluidity for guys to understand where they should be, especially when the schemes around them are changing. And Atkinson is so good at that. He keeps a cool head about it too. He really seems like he's got the total buy-in of the team. Like I want to know, just as like from a strictly corny standpoint, but like I want to know if he took these guys out in the summer, like what was the team building activities, because they all seem like they've just gelled so quickly.
So I think a big part of that was training camp. And I think you're seeing more and more of this throughout the NBA is teams are going out of market for their training camp, right? Like the Clippers have gone to Hawaii for a number of years. I believe the Philadelphia 76ers have gone to Colorado for training camp a couple of times. Well, the Cavs went to IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida for a week. And I think that despite the fact that, like I mentioned, this group has been together, this is really the second year they've been together, the third year for the core of the team, but the second year that the whole team has been together. I think that gave them an opportunity, not necessarily to bond with each other, because I think those bonds were already built, but I think it gave them an opportunity to bond with a mostly new coaching staff And I'm not saying that there was like magic in the water down in Florida, but I do think that without that, they'd still be pretty good, but that probably pushed them ahead of schedule a little bit. I think that has given them the ability to trust Kenny Atkinson sooner and vice versa too. And I don't think that the Cavs get to this point without that, because if you look at a game like Monday night in Chicago, where they won that game partially because Kenny Atkinson went with a lineup of 5 bench players for a 5-minute stretch in the third quarter. And that lineup played exclusively a zone defense, had never played together in minutes that mattered yet in the season. And they turned a 9-point deficit into a 3-point lead going into the fourth quarter. Like those things, I don't think happen without the trust that in the buy-in that this team has with Atkinson.
And that's when we saw the debut of my summer league standout, Travers. I love that guy.
Right.
I think it was in that game. Yeah.
So he played in the Brooklyn game. He played a few minutes in the Brooklyn game, and that, it helped them. They have been able to rely on different guys, and Ty Jerome has been really, I can't even say the unsung hero because people in Cleveland are now obsessed with him, but Ty Jerome has been such a bright spot for this team. Like against Chicago, he's a plus 21 in 21 minutes and just makes play after play after play. And I don't think all that stuff happens without Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, like especially with the bench, because one, it speaks to trust, which I think is something that you and I have been alluding to this entire podcast. Like there's so much trust running through this team, but when you have trust like that with your starters, but also like with the bench and like some deeper options on the bench, it's a very cool thing because you end up giving kind of sunlight to all these guys who maybe are not accustomed to seeing this many NBA minutes, right? And it's like, yeah, you get to, slip in here and there and play like the last minute or 2 minutes of a game, basically just as a plug, but they're getting meaningful time and they're being like fit in and catered to in terms of their like offensive schemes of the team, just like the rotations, like they're being considered. And I think like that does make such a difference in terms of development. And this is like kind of an interesting bonus because I would not like the Cavs are not a developmental team by any measure this season, right? They don't need to be focusing on that. But what that tells me is that the ecosystem there is so healthy and robust and like very considerate of everybody being a part of it equally. That's what also I think speaks to how lasting this could be. And, goes back to this trust point of like how Kenny Atkinson has gotten people to quote buy in. It's easy to get athletes to buy in when you're giving them minutes.
Right. Like, exactly.
Yeah.
He's been 10 deep every night. When Max Strus comes back, I expect he's going to try and expand his rotation to 11. It's really hard to play, 11 guys, 10 or more minutes, but I think Kenny Atkinson's going to find a way. All right. I've got one big question for Katie that needs to be answered before we get out of here. That's next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is, never what you get. Somewhere between the store and the time you get your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying, well, that magically skyrockets. But with Mint Mobile, here to tell you, you'll never have to worry about the gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overage, because Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. That's important. You don't want to lose that stuff, right? Mint Mobile's got you covered there. So dish overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA, LOCKEDONNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on 3-month plan only. Speeds slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited data plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions do apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review as well. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Katie, the big question that I need an answer to: can the 2024-2025 Cleveland Cavaliers win the NBA Finals?
Yes, I think so. And this actually goes to a point I didn't get to make in the last segment, but what they're doing sneakily by playing so many guys on any given night, this speaks to conditioning as well, right? This speaks to longevity and conditioning and having a roster that's deep enough to be able to make it all the way there. Series is like in the postseason are long. Like them themselves are slogs. We're talking about ecosystems. Like every series is different. No two games within a series will be the same. Teams have to, this is the thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. And you saw it with the Celtics last season. You did see it with the Nuggets a little bit, but a very good team that is going to win the championship has to evolve in real time, almost on like an accelerated timeline throughout the playoffs, right? Like teams that stay static, that kind of rely on the things that got them to that point in the regular season, lose very quickly.
Yes.
Things are just like amped up to like such a heightened degree. And when you see teams able to do that, to not one, just like adjust their intelligence, adjust their responses to their opponents, but also for players to be able to kind of take all that learning in real time, especially for young teams, that's really hard, and now the Cavs have like had a toe in here and there for a few postseasons now. And like none of those went the way they wanted them to. So they have had this like taste of defeat, which they did not like, which honestly also goes a long way toward that learning that we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think we think, oh, it's just momentum. And like, if a team goes undefeated, like we've seen a lot of teams have stellar regular season records only to just completely fall apart in the postseason. So I think a lot of these like small adjustments, that's what I'm mostly been focused on with the Cavs. I talked about the conditioning point. That is a huge one. But like when you're starting to put in all these guys rotationally now, you're already testing what you have. You're testing which lineups you can kind of throw out, where you can go small, where you're going to go huge, where you're going to rely more on like length and strength and weighting, and where you're going to try and pick the game up and speed things along. And I think to be able to play at all those different levels and speeds is very hard. But the fact that Cleveland they're basically doing their A/B tests now, I think that speaks very well to their chances.
Yeah, and I think the conditioning thing is a really good point. And you look at this, just pull up their basketball reference page and look at the per game stats. Donovan Mitchell is leading the team in minutes at 30.7, which is like 4 minutes below his career low for minutes per game. And part of that is because of the 12 games they've played, like 6 of them have been blowout wins, and he's not needed to play a full minutes allotment. But I also don't think Kenny Atkinson is trying to play any of his starters 35, 36 minutes a night, the way that this team did under JB Bickerstaff. And I think that will pay dividends at the end of the season. The Cavs right now through 12 games, Donovan Mitchell is averaging 30.7 minutes per game. Evan Mobley is averaging 30 minutes a game, and no one else is over 30. Like that is something that I think is special and could be a big deal for them when we get to April, May, and potentially June.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about, which we're going to have to at some point, like beating Boston, right? Beating a team like the Celtics, which is so good and seamless to a degree that they have become almost mechanical. A lot of that is going to be outlasting and throwing things at them to try and frustrate them. Like that is what worked against the Celtics when it did work last season. And I think the Cavs have the personnel to be able to do that, but they're also now going to have the staying power to be able to do that.
You can check out Katie at Basketball Feelings, her Substack. Also, you can check out her every single day as part of the Locked On Cavs newsletter. She writes our national coverage. Just go sign up for that at Locked On Daily. Katie, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Like I said earlier, you can find Locked On Cavs anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be a friend, tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. I will be back. The Cavs take on the Sixers tonight. They look to go to 13-0. We'll talk about it tomorrow right here on Locked On Cavs.